In this video, the neuroscientist provides a fascinating insight into the power of rewiring our brains. By abstaining from addictive substances or behaviors for just about 30 days, we can have the potential to reset our brain's reward system. Scientific studies back this idea, revealing that it takes about a month for the brain to regenerate dopamine transmission and recover from the effects of addictive behaviors.
One of the quickest ways to boost someone's testosterone is to have them achieve a win.
This is an empowering revelation, as it shows that we have the ability to break free from the grip of addiction and create positive change in our lives. It's incredible to think that in just 30 days, our brain can begin to heal and restore balance. This video highlights the importance of perseverance and offers hope for these seeking alternatives to harmful habits.
If you can't put #sex, you try and put that in, you won't find it. Or if you do that in your post, it's going to get downregulated.
Right.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And you can kind of understand why, right? I mean, otherwise the entire thing would be filled with all sorts of pornography and pseudo-pornography.
The concept presented by the neuroscientist in this video opens up a world of possibilities. It shows us that we have the capacity to rewire our brains and to overcome addictive patterns within a 30-day time frame. The scientific evidence supporting this idea is compelling, indicating that our brains need approximately a month to regenerate dopamine pathways and recover from the negative effects of addiction.
So does that mean that demotivated men are producing less testosterone?
We can say that the data show that repeated failures take testosterone levels lower than they would be otherwise. That is not to say that people with low testosterone will always fail, those with higher testosterone.
This knowledge is empowering, suggesting that we can reclaim control over our lives and find healthier sources of fulfillment. It's a reminder that change is possible, and that by committing to a short period of abstinence, we can pave the way for a long-lasting transformation.
I'm not saying pornography as a stimulus is bad or good. What I'm saying is in its availability and its extreme forms, it's a very potent stimulus. And very potent stimuli of any kind, extremely palatable food, extreme pornography, extreme experiences like bungee cord jumping, those set a threshold for dopamine release.
This video sparks hope and encourages individuals to explore alternative paths towards a more fulfilling and balanced existence. The study being discussed here sheds light on the remarkable connection between abstinence and mental well-being.
Pornography, it creates a strong dopamine rush. These are very primitive pathways that in some ways can overwhelm the dopamine system. And then, another thing is happening. So a lot of young guys are getting all this arousal from watching other people have sex. And then they're in the real world scenario and it's like, wait, you're no longer third personing this. You're actually in this scene.
When a group of depressed, alcohol-addicted men were deprived of alcohol for 4 weeks, a staggering 80% of them no longer met the criteria for major depression.
We have circuits in our brain that immediately give us the reaction you just give. You put your head back. It's kind of like, get me away from that topic.
He was
get me away.
Going in.
Yeah, he was getting excited.
Just talking it back.
Right. So our brain tends to put us into approach types, which we call appetitive, like smell in the odor, taste, you want to get close to something, or aversive.
This finding provides further support that giving our brains the opportunity to regenerate dopamine balance can have profound positive effects on our mental health. It is astonishing to witness how a relatively short period of abstinence can lead to such significant improvements. 4 weeks in the scheme of your life really ain't that bad, right?
Can we create Pavlovian reactions to ourselves, to the things that we want?
Well, and there's a dark side to this too. And it's something that I think especially guys, young guys have to be careful of, which is nowadays the availability of pornography is nothing like it used to be, right? Someone used to have a magazine or a video. Now there's access to pornography is just, a couple, thumb taps to a couple people. And people can get very, young people can develop a lot of their arousal template to very extreme experiences, right? Because of the availability of extreme porn and never actually have any real world experience.
Yes.
So if you think about it, their brains are becoming wired up to become aroused watching other people have sex.
Instead of having sex themselves.
Exactly.
So they're I've heard of people like that they need to watch porn in order to come. So they're having sex while watching porn.
Or even to get aroused. And here,
clinical fetish.
I have to say, that I get hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of questions, different health topics and science topics. One of the most common questions I get is how to quit porn addiction. And I would say about 25% of the people that I'm aware of based on those questions and a few people that I happen to know who are porn addicted are women.
Yeah.
And it becomes an issue where, do you ask, can there become a self-conditioned Pavlovian response?
Yeah.
The initial phase of abstinence can be undeniably difficult. During the first 10 days, individuals may experience discomfort, anxiety, sleep troubles, and agitation. It's important to acknowledge these challenges as part of the process.
Is only the drug-seeking behavior, and no other behavior will give the kind of potent dopamine release that cocaine or methamphetamine will, which is why they are so pernicious. Now, likewise, right. I'm not...
Well, plus they have that powerful reinforcing effect, right? So not only do you get that kick, but what's reinforced by the dopamine release is the behaviors that were right prior, particularly right prior to the ingestion. And if all that is the drug-taking behavior, that's all that develops.
That's right.
You build that monster inside your head.
That's right.
So I can see where you're going on the pornography front.
Right. So I was starting to get a lot of questions. I was kind of surprised. I thought, well, I'm male and, maybe that's why they feel comfortable asking. But people were saying, we're asking about pornography, and they were asking, I realized we want to, I'll just be direct about it. They were asking whether or not masturbation was bad. They were asking whether or not masturbation with ejaculation was particularly bad. And here's my stance on this. I'm a biologist and a neuroscientist, not a psychologist. But what we know for sure is that if an individual repeatedly engages in this circuitry, let's say masturbation and pornography with increasingly potent forms of stimulation that are on a screen, a couple of things happen. First of all, what's being reinforced? What's being reinforced is a high dopaminergic response to watching other people engage in sexual behavior, which is very different than being in a first-person sexual experience. Okay? So right there, that what's being reinforced is not actually any kind of improvement in communication skills. It's voyeurism. And as these questions started to come in more and more, I started to realize there was a lot of kind of undertones of people talking about fear of or experience with sexual dysfunction that clearly pornography can lead to. And here I'm specifically talking about males. I actually don't know the literature on females. So here I'm talking about...
Females don't use visual pornography to the same degree.
I see.
They use literary pornography.
I see.
However, the encouraging news is that by the third week, most people begin to notice a significant improvement in their well-being. They start to feel better, and their brains gradually restore the release of dopamine in response to enjoyable activities. This transformation signifies the brain's incredible ability to heal and adapt. It shows that perseverance through the initial discomfort can lead to rewarding outcomes.
Well, and with anything, anytime
yeah.
we experience a powerful emotional response or physical response, so that could be sexual arousal, it could be hunger, it could be fear, it could be excitement, whatever preceded that becomes the thing that our brain basically thinks leads to that. So the brain is a prediction machine. So and this has all sorts of roots around trauma and things that could be positive or negative. So you can imagine that if every time, your parent blinked and then they hit you when you were a kid.
See that blink.
You see someone blinking and you get kind of your heart rate goes up, et cetera, because the brain generalizes, but it wants to predict what's going to happen next. On the positive side, if every time you arrived at your grandmother's house, you knew that there was going to be delicious food and you were going to feel very nourished, no trauma, then just walking up to a doorbell of a similar home, you might find I just feel good right now. We are very kind of crude in our wiring, right? Our brain generalizes to try and predict. So, but in terms of the extreme things like sexual arousal, if young, and I do say guys, it's women watch pornography also, that's been well established, but I get a lot of questions from guys who are addicted to porn and who have challenges in sexual interactions in the real world because they either need that or they don't really understand, they haven't been socialized in terms of normal consensual sexual interactions. And I always say, anytime we're talking about this sort of thing, the disclaimer is we're talking about age appropriate, consensual, context appropriate, species appropriate, right? Throw in species appropriate because, there's all sorts of things out there.
While not everyone can overcome addictive behaviors on their own, the transformative power of the 30-day approach has the potential to change your life forever. Many individuals who have struggled with severe addictions have found lasting abstinence through this method, opening doors to a better life and discovering alternative sources of pleasure.
So, and then you start to think about, okay, what happens in the cascade or the arc of sexual arousal and orgasm? What happens is that initially there's it's parasympathetically dominant, meaning if somebody is too stressed, they actually can't engage in sexual behavior. The arousal response doesn't occur. Erection is blunted, but the actual orgasm response and ejaculation is strongly associated with the so-called sympathetic nervous system, which has nothing to do with sympathy. It has everything to do with, it's a kind of a stress response. And then it reverses to a parasympathetic response. And a hormone called prolactin increases dramatically after ejaculation in males. What does that do? That blunts dopamine release and testosterone for a very long period of time, which makes sense if pair bonding and sort of, in our species anywhere, there's this idea that then other molecules would be exchanged with partners, pair bonding, potential for raising mates, etc. Without getting into a huge discussion about that, the point is this. Masturbation and pornography are potently tapping into the dopamine system and can undermine the very processes of what I consider healthy processes of finding a mate, dating, communication, eventually, if it's appropriate, sexual interaction,
etc.
Like
it's undermining pair bonding.
And pair bonding.
So here's a question: if you're seeking sexual release through pornography and you go through the whole cycle and you get a prolactin release, do you bond with yourself?
So this is very interesting. The biology explains it as what's left there is a kind of an open loop, a kind of an emptiness, right? Because bonding with the self is a complicated notion. I mean, there's a healthy version of that, of course, loving oneself and self-referencing. Yeah. And again, this is more far more your domain than mine in terms of what a healthy self-relation is. But in the absence of a real partner there, of an absence of real sexual partner, there's an open loop of neurochemicals, including oxytocin and prolactin. The dopamine, remember, dopamine goes up during pursuit, anticipation, then peaks and then crashes below baseline after orgasm and ejaculation.
This journey offers a profound opportunity for personal growth and transformation. It signifies the chance to break free from the grips of addiction and embark on the path towards a brighter future. Though the initial phase will present challenges.
So I think that it's interesting, like extreme stuff of any kind, or even, for instance, people who get really into fetish type sex, or they get into, having multiple, they get really into threesomes, right? Yeah, this is a very, as long as we're talking openly, there are a lot of people that I know who got really into this during the kind of early stages of the polyamory movement, right? So, which started in the 70s, but then came back again in the early 2000s. And then they found that they could not get aroused with just one partner. And that's because their brain was so used to a certain set of things preceding this.
The commitment to 30 days of abstinence can lead to a profound shift in your life. All it takes is potentially 30 days for a lifetime worth of differences.
When you look in the journals of sexual health, and I'm really interested in sexual health and urological health. There's a ton of interesting stuff on pelvic floor. This stuff just isn't often discussed. Yeah. What you find is that masturbation for women turns out to their self-reported notions of well-being, of mood, of immune system function, of quote unquote knowing their bodies and what gives them pleasure, etc., all increase. If you look at the data in men in terms of masturbation, and here we're talking about masturbation to the point of ejaculation in men, they report lower mood, less willingness to pursue relationships.
Shocker.
They're home watching porn, right? So we have to be very careful with statements like masturbation is bad or something like that, because that's not true. It's going to be genders. Well, we should say, stay out of that discussion. Biological sex dependent, because that's a clearer ground. We'll just leave it at that. And then there is this whole notion that a whole generation of young males are becoming porn addicted and masturbation addicted, but can't look someone in the eye, ask them out on a date, or learn how to navigate healthy consensual sex, right? And they're not doing neck work, so they can't look anyone in the eye. I'm just kidding.
They've got flaccid feet and they don't do neck work.
Yeah, I mean, and here I'm not trying to create notions of hyper males. We're really just talking about a radical shift in the way that sexual health has evolved over the last 10 years because of the accessibility of hardcore pornography, its relation to the dopamine system.
Yeah.
So here I'm not trying to be evangelical or anything like that. I'm just saying these are serious neurotransmitter / hormone systems. And a whole generation of males is making themselves sated enough to not actually pursue a number of what used to be considered milestones toward the transition between young adulthood and true adulthood. And, its birth rates are low, dating is low.
Oh, yeah.
Sex, a few people are having a lot more sex. So this is great for the people out there who are comfortable in social interactions.
Right.
Anyway, we don't want to go down that path too far, but these are deeply wired systems.
It's a journey that holds the power to reshape your mindset, restore your balance, and unlock new avenues of fulfillment. Embracing this approach can be a life-altering decision that sets you on a course for lasting, positive change.
I can understand not ingesting a lot of highly palatable foods, eating some blander foods. I can understand certainly not doing any prescription drugs or taking some time off from caffeine. Caffeine increases dopamine receptors, which makes the dopamine that's available more powerful at evoking the dopamine response. I can understand avoiding certain substances and behaviors, but the idea that you weren't going to look people in the eye because there's going to be too much dopamine, I guess it depends on who you're looking in the eye and how much their look positively arouses you. But the fact of the matter is that that's not a very rational way to think about dopamine detox. But staying out of high intensity, highly rewarding activities, I think could be useful in terms of reestablishing that dopamine balance. And everything we know from Anna's work is that dopamine, if you drive those dopaminergic states too long, addictive drugs, et cetera, people can do this with sex, food, drugs, gambling, social media, all sorts of things, pornography. What ends up happening is the amount of dopamine that's released over time goes down and down and down and down and pretty much is traversing into the territory of pain. And then people, again, are back to this thing where, they're scrolling internet porn 8, 9, 10 times or hours a day. And then they're wondering why this isn't effective for them anymore, whereas it was before. And there's an additional issue with pornography, which is not often discussed, which is that, remember, guys in particular, the brain is a learning prediction machine. And I'm not trying to say that all pornography is bad, but there are good data to support the idea that if your brain learns to be aroused by watching other people have sex, it is not necessarily going to carry over to the ability to get aroused when you're one-on-one with somebody else, right? Especially young kids who are consuming a lot of pornography, the brain is learning sexual arousal to other people having sex.
So you're going to program yourself into being a voyeur?
Or just create challenges in sexual interactions with peer, with a real partner.